104.5 The Team, your home for New York sports. Levack Goz here, and of course we're joined by Chris Stone. He covers the NBA and the NBA draft for Fansided and Sporting News. Look, Chris, it was interesting to me. Arizona falls directly on their face. That doesn't hurt DeAndre Ayton's draft stock at all, does it?
Honestly, probably not very much. I mean, NBA evaluators at this point have had an entire season to look at Ayton. It's a little disheartening to see a prospect like that on a team that, in some people's minds, was the top team coming into the country, go out in a blowout to Buffalo in the first round of the NCAA tournament. But NBA people will be able to point to the data that they have from earlier in the season that suggests that Ayton is probably one of the top three prospects in this class. So I think he'll be fine.
So, all right, Chris, as a long-suffering Knicks fan, the draft is one of those moments where I can look at it and go, hey, maybe this will help. Is Ayton the kind of guy that could help the Knicks if they were lucky enough to be that high in the draft?
Oh, of course. I mean, Ayton certainly is one of the premier players in the draft. He has an elite offensive game, especially from the mid-range, can pop out to the three-point line a little bit, and is physically dominant in ways that other college players just aren't right now. I mean, Ayton is 7'1", 250 pounds already, and he's a 19-year-old freshman in college, which is not really something that you see until people develop until they're 23 or 24. The obvious question is, how does he fit next to Kristaps Porzingis in the front court? But I think everybody's kind of aware at this point that Porzingis likes to play a little bit of the four. You can probably figure those two out. Ayton's biggest problem is that he's not a great rim protector. Porzingis is terrific at that, and Ayton can handle a little bit more of the perimeter duties that come along with playing that position.
Chris Stone with us right now. He covers the NBA and the draft for Fansided and the Sporting News. So, Chris, who are some other potential picks you could see being beneficial to the Knicks early in the draft?
So the Knicks, I think, right now are projected somewhere in that back end of the top 10 range. There are a lot of prospects that I really like there. Obviously, the Knicks have some questions about what they want to do with Frank Ntilikina, if they think he's a future point guard or if they think he's a shooting guard. But both Trae Young and Colin Sexton should be available in that range for the Knicks. I think either of them would make good options as lead guard prospects next to Ntilikina. Trae Young probably more so than Sexton just because he brings more shooting to the table. The other prospect I really like in that range is Villanova's Mikal Bridges. Really well-built 3-and-D wing prospect who hits over 40% from three, creates a ton of blocks and steals, and has the positional size to be a versatile defender in the modern NBA. And I think if you look at the teams at the top of the league, it's easy to understand that you can never have too many of those types of players.
Chris, you brought up Trae Young. Obviously, he was the hot name for most of the college season. Is the comparisons to Steph Curry, are they even remotely fair to this kid?
I mean, in some of the play style, sure. I guess you can see some of that in that he likes to pull up off the dribble from 30 feet well behind the three-point line. But the truth is that anyone to hit a development curve to end up where Steph Curry is unlikely to do so. And I think that it's more likely that we could compare him to someone, say, like Damian Lillard as a ceiling comp for a player like Trae Young. And that's still a really, really good player. It's just that Steph is a generational shooter, and comparing anyone to generational players is always going to do a disservice to the prospects themselves.
It's funny because one of the New York newspapers is asking the question: Is Trae Young Steph Curry or Jimmer Fredette? And in upstate New York, that's blasphemous. You shouldn't try to differentiate between the two, but you can kind of see where one fits the NBA and one really doesn't.
Yeah, I mean, the difference between Trae Young and Jimmer Fredette, I think, comes down to Trae Young's passing, and that's probably why he has a better chance of ending up closer to the Damian Lillard style comparisons that I was talking about earlier, rather than anything close to Jimmer Fredette. Fredette was a pure gunner and liked to get buckets, and that was a super fun basketball player, but it was a limited one. And Trae Young, on the other hand, is a terrific passer who can really set the table for his teammates. Now, some of the problems at Oklahoma were questions related to his supporting cast, and I think once Trae gets playing next to NBA teammates who can knock down shots, you're going to really see the game open up for him.
Chris Stone with us right now, Fansided and the Sporting News, right here on 104.5 The Team. As you're watching the Sweet 16, Chris, who are the players that you're grading best as they may enter the NBA right after the tournament?
So the top prospects who are left in the tournament, obviously, a couple of them play for Duke. You've got Marvin Bagley and Wendell Carter Jr., two of the best bigs in the class. Mikal Bridges with Villanova is the top 10 prospect. And then you just kind of have a number of prospects a little further down the totem pole. You have Jalen Brunson, Javon Carter, Devontae Graham are all older point guard prospects who could turn out to be really serviceable NBA backups. But those are probably the primary guys. If you're looking at the top of the draft, though, it's the Marvin Bagleys, the Wendell Carters, the Mikal Bridges, and maybe even Shai Gilgeous-Alexander for Kentucky.
You must be mistaken, Chris, on your notes. Where does it say Grayson Allen?
It does not say Grayson Allen. Grayson is Grayson will be a borderline first rounder potentially at his best. Grayson obviously has some NBA ready skills. He's a great shooter. He can shoot off of movement. He can shoot off the catch. But, the truth is that Grayson is just not going to be a positive defender in the NBA, and that's going to put him in a rough position. But anybody who can shoot in the modern NBA is going to get a look.
Chris Stone with us. So, Chris, before I let you go, every year in the NBA draft, it's funny. You talk about Steph Curry. Steph Curry should have been a Knick, but he was kind of under the radar when he came out. Are there some under the radar guys you're keeping an eye on as you get ready? And if a team's lucky enough to land him, it could be a big payday.
The person who interests me a little bit more, and he's moving closer up in the lotto, is Shai Gilgeous-Alexander with Kentucky. He's a 6'6" point guard with a tall, lanky frame, and doesn't play with the same type of athleticism that most of the point guards in the modern NBA play with, but he's really patient and comfortable at his own tempo and is able to get to the rim at a high rate. And he's impressive because he's ambidextrous and can finish with both hands, pass with both hands, and do all of that. And so he's someone who I think has the potential to go in the late lottery that might make some of those teams in the lottery question why they didn't take him earlier.
Chris, do you do a bracket, or is that something that you stay away from?
I do one bracket every year.
How has your bracket fared so far?
That's a good question. I think I probably have about half of the Sweet 16 teams left, which is pretty good given everything that's happened. I lost one of the teams that I thought would play in the finals in Virginia, but I still have 3 Final Four teams alive in Villanova, Duke, and Gonzaga.
So we got Goz. He's a diehard Cuse fan, and me, I root for Michigan. Yep. I grew up during the Fab Five era. Any chance 1 to 10 chance that Michigan faces Syracuse in the finals?
I think it's pretty low, and that's mostly going to be Syracuse's fault, right? I think Michigan's really, really good, and it's an interesting version of a Michigan team that is historically known for its offense. With Syracuse, they just have such a tough matchup in their region coming up against Duke, a team that beat them by 16 points the first time. I think that Duke probably knows how to play against that zone better than everyone, but it's Syracuse, and it's the NCAA tournament, and I don't know that anybody expected them to get this far. So, who knows what's going to happen with them.
Chris, before let's go, since we're talking about Michigan real quick, Mo Wagner, is he going to be in this year's draft? And if so, how high could he go?
Certainly, if he wants to be in this year's draft, he will be. He is probably someone who's closer to a second-round prospect than a first-round prospect at this point. I compared him to kind of a budget version of Lauri Markkanen the other day, in that he's able to get his own offense off the bounce and kind of these straight-line drives, and he's a modern big who can shoot from the perimeter. But he has a lot of defensive question marks that I think will perk up at the NBA level.
Chris Stone, Fansided, and the Sporting News. Nice enough to make some time for us, man. We appreciate you. Thanks for helping make sense of the NBA and the draft.
Hey, thanks for having me on. Really appreciate it.